Don't worry, John! You fired at an innocent woman.
Valerie Huxford fired before I even reached the curve. The gunshot cracked through Maple Crest Estates like a warning no one asked for, the sound ripping across the cedar-lined lane as my wife's car jerked in terror. The board chair didn't lower the weapon. She held it steady, smug, like she'd just enforced a law she invented 5 minutes earlier. "You're endangering the community," she yelled, pointing the barrel toward the dent she'd created. That was the lie she hid behind. But the truth? I'd seen the trajectory before I even reached the door. That's when I dropped the reversal she never expected. Your bullet didn't hit her windshield because she wasn't speeding. The curve physically prevents more than 15 miles per hour. Your shot came from the wrong angle to prove otherwise. Her expression twitched, just once. Enough to show she understood I wasn't guessing. I knew. If you've ever watched someone abuse authority and felt that fire in your chest, lean in and hit subscribe now. I kept my voice steady as I stepped closer, refusing to match the tyrant in heels theatrics. "I'm not just another homeowner you can push around," I said. "I reconstruct accidents for a living. Trajectory, impact analysis, velocity curves. This stretch of road is basically my second office." Her jaw tightened at that. Good, because I needed her to understand exactly who she'd just fired at, and how badly she'd miscalculated. But none of this was about proving her wrong. This was about Lena. My wife had been gripping the wheel so tightly her knuckles turned white. That curve, the one near the cedar tree, was supposed to be her safe lane, a place where she could practice driving again after months of recovery from her nervous system condition. Sudden noises could trigger episodes. Sudden fear could unravel weeks of progress. And a sudden gunshot? That was worse than fear. That was an attack. I saw her chest rising too fast, saw the tremble in her fingers as she stared at the dent in the car door, right where her shoulder had been seconds earlier. That lane wasn't just asphalt. It was the symbol of everything she'd fought to reclaim: peace, confidence, normalcy. And the officer of rules had nearly ripped it away. Behind Valerie, 2 board members rushed over, but the enforcer in crimson reached her first, adjusting her blazer like she hadn't nearly witnessed something criminal. "Madam President," she whispered, "we can manage this internally." Internally. The word tasted like rot. The clipboard queen chimed in, waving a stack of violation slips. "Your wife blew through the turn. We all saw it." They hadn't. The lie was obvious. I walked to the rear panel and pointed at the fresh metal distortion. "You're calling that enforcement? This is a bullet. Strike from a low firing angle. She wasn't speeding. She was targeted." The tyrant in heels didn't flinch. "Don't you accuse me of—" "I'm stating facts," I cut in, "and facts don't care about HOA politics." A few neighbors peeked through their blinds. One stepped onto their porch. Another came down the walkway slowly, drawn by the echo of conflict. Maple Crest was waking up. People were listening, and the board chair knew that meant losing control. "Grant," Lena whispered, voice shaking, "let's go home." But home wasn't safe if this woman faced no consequence. That realization hit me like a slap. Valerie Huxford hadn't made a mistake. This wasn't fear. This was escalation, which meant the only way to protect my wife was to confront what was coming. And somewhere behind me, I heard tires on loose gravel, the sound I'd know anywhere, my brother's patrol unit. The moment Valerie saw the silhouette of a state trooper stepping out, her confidence cracked like thin glass. She had no idea her day was about to break wide open. And before we dive deeper, where are you watching from? Eric's boots hit the pavement before the dust even settled. My brother didn't rush. He didn't need to. State troopers carried authority differently. And the moment Valerie Huxford saw him step fully into the light, the certainty she'd been clinging to evaporated. The board chair straightened her spine like she could will the moment back under her control, but her eyes betrayed her. They flicked from Eric's badge to the dented side of Lena's car, then to the neighbors now trickling toward the edge of the cul-de-sac. She suddenly realized she didn't get to direct the narrative anymore. The enforcer in crimson muttered, "Madam President, maybe we should move this discussion." "No," Valerie snapped, "I'll handle it." But her voice wobbled, just enough to confirm something important. She was scared, not sorry. Eric didn't speak to her first. He stepped to Lena's window, lowering himself to her eye level. "Are you hurt?" he asked gently. Lena shook her head, but the tremor in her hands gave her away. She shot at me for speeding in a curve you can't speed through. His jaw clenched. I see. Only then did he turn toward the tyrant in heels. Ma'am, he said, voice calm but layered with something that made even the clipboard queen freeze. Put the weapon on the ground. Slowly. Valerie bristled. This is private property. HOA leadership is permitted to— You fired a live round toward a moving vehicle, Eric said, cutting through her excuse like it wasn't even there. Location doesn't change the law. Put it down. For a moment, she didn't move. A silent standoff. Then the first neighbor spoke up. We heard the shot. Another. We saw the muzzle flash. Another. She's been threatening people for months. And just like that, the story she'd been constructing since the trigger pull began unraveling publicly. Still, the officer of rules attempted to salvage it. It was a safety measure, she said quickly. The driver was endangering the community. I was going 12, Lena whispered. Eric didn't look away from Valerie. Ma'am, the weapon. This time, the board chair lowered it. Not gracefully. More like someone surrendering something she suddenly realized was radioactive. The enforcer in crimson flinched as the pistol touched the asphalt. I watched the shift ripple through the crowd. They weren't afraid of her anymore. They were afraid of what she'd become, but fear wasn't my priority. Lena was. I moved to her again, brushing her cheek with my thumb. I'm here, I whispered. I won't let this stand. Her breath steadied just barely. Behind us, the clipboard queen tried again. Your wife's driving has been an issue, she insisted. This isn't the first complaint filed in our speed control program. I stepped toward her. Your radar gun isn't certified. Your speed postings aren't in legal compliance. And your so-called program has never been submitted to the city. Her lips parted, shock flickering. Valerie, desperate, jumped in. You don't get to question our system. I designed systems like this, I said. I know every flaw, every shortcut, every illegal corner cut you thought no one would notice. For the first time, her posture faltered. Eric caught that. Everyone did. Neighbors pushed a little closer, the semicircle growing tighter. People who had stayed quiet for years were now stepping forward without hesitation. Because the moment a shot rang out, their fear shifted sides. The enforcer in crimson cleared her throat. We should pause and regroup, she murmured, more to herself than anyone else. But the moment was past regrouping. This was exposure, and exposure terrifies dictators more than consequences. Eric pulled a small flashlight from his belt and examined the bullet strike on the car. Then he measured the angle with his penlight, tracing the path visually, his brow tightening. The round was fired from a low stance, he said. Shooter was no more than 8 feet behind the vehicle. That's intentional proximity. The officer of rules whispered, Oh my God! Valerie tried to recover. I reacted. She was accelerating. She wasn't, I said. And you know she wasn't. Silence fell so thick it felt like fog. Eric rose slowly. Grant, he said quietly, this isn't an HOA issue anymore. Those words broke whatever illusion of power Valerie had been clinging to, and as neighbors exchanged looks, fearful, relieved, emboldened, I realized something. This wasn't just about Lena. This was about every person she'd bullied into silence. And today, the silence broke. Officer Daniel Vega arrived late, not physically, but morally. By the time he stepped out of his cruiser and adjusted his duty belt with trembling hands, the atmosphere around the cul-de-sac had already shifted against Valerie Huxford. The board chair stood rigidly beside the dropped handgun, trying to feign authority. But even from a distance, Daniel's nervous glance told me he recognized exactly how bad this looked. He approached cautiously, eyes bouncing from Lena's dented car to Eric's stiff posture, to the enforcer in crimson hovering like a shadow, desperate to rewrite the situation. But when Daniel's gaze landed on Valerie herself, the clipboard queen watching from behind her, something inside him flickered, an emotion caught halfway between duty and fear. Officer Vega, Valerie said sharply, like she was summoning an employee, not an officer. You'll document that she was speeding, excessively, dangerously. His throat bobbed in a hard swallow. He didn't answer. Instead, he looked at me, really looked, and the internal battle was written across his face as clearly as if someone had carved it into his skin. The pressure Valerie had put on him over the past year, the complaints she'd buried, the times he'd shown up to resolve HOA conflicts, but left knowing she'd twisted his presence into intimidation. The tyrant in heels stepped closer, whispering, "This is your jurisdiction, officer, remember?" Her voice dripped with quiet threat. Daniel's jaw tightened, but he stayed silent. Eric stepped beside me. "Officer Vega," he said evenly, "before you take any statement, you need to see the strike point." Daniel nodded, but his hand shook when he reached for his flashlight. He forced it still, but not well. His steps toward Lena's car were slow, measured, not because he lacked skill, but because he was terrified of contradicting Valerie Huxford publicly. He leaned down to inspect the dent, breathing unevenly. I watched him examine the indentation, the metal distortion, the shape of the strike. His brows furrowed, his flashlight beam quivered. "You see the angle?" I asked softly. He did. He absolutely did, but he didn't answer me. He didn't answer anyone. The officer of rules pushed forward. "Officer, please record that the driver accelerated out of control." Daniel swallowed again. "That's not what I'm observing." Valerie stiffened as if she'd been slapped. "Daniel," she hissed, "we've discussed speeding patterns in this curve." "We've discussed a lot of things," he muttered, almost too quietly. His eyes flicked to me again, then to Lena's trembling hands still on the wheel. That did it. His internal struggle became visible. His breath quickened, shoulders tight, eyelids fluttering in hesitation. He looked physically ill with the weight of choosing between the truth and the influence that had held him hostage. The clipboard queen stepped forward, voice sharp. "Officer, this is a simple citation request. Just follow the procedure." He recoiled slightly, as if the pressure burned. Eric leaned in, voice low. "Your badge means something when you stand with it, not behind someone else." Daniel closed his eyes for a moment, longer than a blink, like he was breathing through years of being cornered. When he opened them again, they were glassy, conflicted, but clearer. "I need to ask the driver some questions," he said. Valerie snapped, "No, you need to listen." "I said," he repeated, louder this time, "I need to ask the driver some questions." A hush rippled across the crowd. That was the first time he'd ever contradicted her in public. He stepped toward Lena's window, and as he crouched down, I saw his hands trembling again, not from fear of her, but from fear of the truth he could no longer ignore. His voice softened. "Ma'am, did you feel endangered before the shot?" Lena nodded, eyes shimmering. "I didn't even know she was behind me. I was going slow. I'm still shaking." Daniel stood, exhaling shakily. His shoulders dropped like a man accepting a consequence he'd been running from. "This wasn't a speeding incident," he said into his recorder. "Gun discharge occurred without justifiable cause." Valerie's entire body went rigid. The enforcer in crimson gasped. The clipboard queen whispered something panicked. The tyrant in heels stepped back like someone had pulled the ground out from under her. Officer Daniel Vega had finally stopped protecting them, and the moment he chose truth over pressure, everything tipped in our favor. The moment Officer Vega recorded his statement, something shifted in Valerie Huxford's posture, a stiffening so sharp it looked painful. The board chair stepped forward with a smile stretched tight enough to crack. It wasn't confidence. It was desperation wearing lipstick. "Everyone needs to disperse," she announced, voice brittle. "The HOA will handle this matter through internal review." Internal review. The phrase made several neighbors whisper angrily. After a gunshot? After her lies began collapsing in front of half the cul-de-sac? The enforcer in crimson hurried beside her, whispering frantically into her ear. Valerie didn't listen. She only narrowed her eyes at Daniel Vega, who stood with his shoulders slumped and his hand still hovering over his recorder, like he wasn't sure he deserved to hold it. "You misunderstood the situation," the clipboard queen snapped at him. "What you saw wasn't negligence, it was enforcement. You'll revise your statement, officer." Daniel flinched, and his internal war flared again. You could see it in the quick rise of his chest, in how he looked toward the sky instead of at her, in the shame still staining his expression from years of enabling her schemes. But he didn't retract a word. Eric stepped closer to me. "This isn't over," he muttered. He was right, because Valerie wasn't done. She pivoted sharply, walking toward the HOA pathway entrance where her board often held their impromptu power huddles. She motioned for the officer of rules, the enforcer in crimson, and the clipboard queen to follow. They did, like obedient shadows. But their expressions told another story. Panic was creeping in. I followed at a distance, not because I wanted to eavesdrop, but because I knew exactly how people like her operated. When cornered, they didn't surrender. They escalated. "We cannot let him turn this on us," Valerie hissed as she spun on her board members. Her voice wasn't loud, but it was sharp enough to slice bark from the cedar trunk behind her. "Do you understand? If he wins this narrative, we lose control of the entire community." The tyrant in heels nodded frantically. "The neighbors are already questioning everything. They're talking about votes, leadership changes." "Then shut it down," Valerie snapped. "This place needs order." She meant control. When she took one step forward, the officer of rules whispered, "But the shot, Valerie, that was necessary," she snapped. The 3 board members shrank back. All of them. Even the enforcer in crimson, who rarely backed down from anything, couldn't mask the fear spreading across her face. That's when I stepped closer. "You're spiraling," I said quietly. Valerie turned, rage igniting. "This is still my jurisdiction." "Not anymore," I replied. "A firearm changed that." Her lips pressed into a thin line. She didn't want to acknowledge it, but she knew. She absolutely knew. A gunshot ended any illusion of procedural power she had left. "You think one officer's hesitation will save you?" she asked, chin high, breath shaky. "You think your brother's badge gives you leverage?" "I think facts do," I answered. She laughed, short, sharp, and jagged. A sound with no humor, only fracture. "Facts are flexible." "Not when they're ballistic," Eric said behind me. The clipboard queen's shoulders sagged at that. Valerie, desperate to claw back control, took a bold step forward. "I built order here. I kept this community safe. I enforced rules no one else had courage to enforce." "You fired at my wife," I said, voice steady. A hush fell. Even the wind seemed to pause. The enforcer in crimson whispered, "Valerie, maybe we should step down temporarily, reassess, let this cool off." The board chair whipped around. "Step down? I am the only thing holding this place together." That wasn't leadership. That was addiction to control. The tyrant in heels rubbed her forehead. "The residents are turning. You saw how many came outside. They're tired. They're confused," Valerie insisted. "That man," she pointed at me, "is manipulating them." "No," I said softly. "You manipulated them. Until today." Her breath hitched. The officer of rules wrung her hands. "What do we do, Valerie?" For the first time, the board chair didn't have an answer. Her silence was louder than any command she'd ever given. And that silence meant the escalation wasn't just beginning. It was about to explode. Eric escorted Lena home while I walked toward the lower parking lot, needing distance from the chaos at the cedar curve. My pulse hadn't slowed since the shot, and every time I replayed that dent in my mind, it hit harder. Valerie Huxford hadn't misjudged. She'd aimed. And she'd aimed at the exact part of the vehicle where Lena leaned whenever panic tightened her chest. As I reached the lot, my eyes landed on something that shouldn't have been there, the HOA's traffic enforcement cart, parked crooked beside the maintenance shed. The board chair used it as her roaming command post, with its blinking hazard bar and makeshift siren system she'd installed without approval. But it wasn't the cart that froze me. It was the tripod, a radar tripod, wrong angle, wrong placement. And the display screen was still lit. Valerie had left it running, and that reckless mistake became the moment everything cracked open. The enforcer in crimson appeared at the top of the hill, whispering into her phone while scanning the area like she was afraid I'd overhear. She didn't realize she was already too late. I crouched beside the tripod, tracing the display angle, and I saw it immediately. The radar was pointed almost directly at the cedar curve, where the shot happened, but it was positioned on a slope that guaranteed false acceleration readings. If a car moved downhill even slowly, the digit spike would mimic speeding. This wasn't enforcement. This was engineered entrapment. I lifted the reflective cone beside it, and there it was. Scuff marks embedded into the pavement where the tripod had been moved back and forth repeatedly. Someone had dragged it to different positions each day, angling it to justify speed fines. My stomach tightened. That someone was the clipboard queen. She'd bragged months ago about data consistency, but the marks told another story. She'd been manipulating the readings, repositioning the rig to target whichever homeowner Valerie wanted to punish next. And today, it had been Lena. The officer of rules rounded the corner then, stopping dead when she saw me kneeling beside the equipment. Her face drained of color. She clutched her folder to her chest like a shield, shivering even though the air wasn't cold. I stood slowly. "You know this setup is illegal." She opened her mouth, but no words came out, only a trembling exhale. "Radar placement has to be flat, certified, and backed by municipal approval," I said. "This is a slope, and that curve is too tight for the readings to be accurate at all. Every citation you've issued is legally void." Her lip quivered. We weren't trying to." "You were," I cut in. "You moved this tripod every week. I can see the scrape pattern." She stepped back, eyes darting toward the path where Valerie Huxford stood, watching from the shadows. The board chair didn't step forward. She wanted distance now, the illusion of innocence. But she didn't hide well. Her fists were clenched, her breathing sharp. The tyrant in heels was unraveling, even if she pretended otherwise. I lifted the tripod slightly and felt the wobble in the base. The legs weren't locked, meaning the readings could fluctuate with wind, vibration, anything. This wasn't even negligence. This was fraud. And fraud meant jurisdiction shifted instantly into outside authority control. That realization lit something inside me. Not rage, clarity. "Grant," a shaky voice said behind me. "Officer Vega." He approached slowly, his face a blend of dread and duty. His internal conflict wasn't hidden anymore. It showed in his hunched shoulders, his heavy steps, the way his hands shook at his sides. "I didn't know she was using faulty equipment," he whispered. "You knew she was pushing boundaries," I replied. He winced. "I didn't think it was this bad." "You're seeing it now." He nodded, swallowing hard. His gaze moved from the tripod to the slope to the curve above us. "This invalidates every speeding claim," he said quietly, "including today's." "And it proves motive," I added. Valerie stepped fully into view then, fire in her eyes, as she realized what I'd uncovered. The enforcer in crimson whispered, "Valerie, what do we do?" She didn't answer, because for the first time, she knew she couldn't control what came next. And neither could her lies. I didn't wait for Valerie Huxford to recover from the discovery at the maintenance shed. I left the crooked tripod where it stood, exposed and damning, and headed toward the walking trail behind Maple Crest. That trail was quiet, shaded by pines, and gave me the space to think without the board chair's eyes drilling into my back. But as soon as my shoes hit the gravel, I heard footsteps behind me. Fast ones. "Grant, wait!" Officer Vega called, slightly out of breath. I stopped beneath the arching branches, turning to face him. The man looked cracked open, guilt clinging to him like a second uniform. His breathing was uneven, his hands were restless. It was the clearest his internal struggle had ever shown itself. "I should have reported her months ago," he said. "I knew she was stepping outside her authority, but she made it sound like the community wanted it." "Does the community want gunfire?" I asked. He winced, eyes falling. "And do they want falsified speed readings?" I added. He flinched again, because he had no answer that wouldn't indict him too. The enforcer in crimson appeared then, heels clicking awkwardly over gravel as she hurried down the trail. "Officer Vega, Madam President needs your cooperation. You shouldn't be out here discussing HOA matters with the victim's husband?" I cut in. She swallowed hard, clearly regretting following us this far from the others. Her red blazer, usually a symbol of her rigid loyalty, looked more like a costume now, a uniform for someone who couldn't step out of Valerie's shadow, even when the ground beneath them was collapsing. "Go back to her," I said. "She'll need the support." It wasn't a threat, it was a diagnosis. She hesitated, torn between retreating and defending the tyrant in heels, but fear won, and she left the trail as quickly as she'd arrived. Daniel stayed, his shoulders slumped as he looked toward the retention pond shimmering under the morning light. "You're going to escalate this, aren't you?" "She shot at my wife," I replied. "There's no version of this where I let it slide." He ran a hand over his face, anxiety trembling through every movement. "She's going to come after me for this. You know that, right? If I testify, if I put the tripod findings in my report, She can't touch you anymore, I said, but I kept my voice steady, not forceful. The moment Eric stepped in, this stopped being an HOA matter. He closed his eyes at that, relief and fear twisting together. She's been pushing me for months, he whispered, calling my station, pressuring me to prioritize community compliance, filing complaints when I didn't issue citations she wanted. The officer of rules stepped into my mind then. The woman so timid behind her folders, she couldn't look me in the eye. How much pressure had she been under? How many threats had Valerie used to keep her silent? She controls everything, Daniel said. The board, the residents, me, and if I go against her. You won't be alone, I interrupted. Not this time. He stared at me, eyes raw. You're really going after her. She put a bullet near Lena's head, I said. This ends now. The trail fell silent except for distant birds and the faint echo of voices from the neighborhood entrance. The clipboard queen was probably scrambling. The officer of rules was likely falling apart. And the tyrant in heels was almost certainly planning her next move, a desperate attempt to restore power before it slipped through her fingers completely. Daniel finally exhaled. Tell me what you need. I didn't hesitate. I need your statement, I said. The real one, not the version she coached you to give. His nod wasn't big, but it was solid, like a man choosing the difficult road because the easy one had just become unbearable. She won't let this go quietly, he warned. She can scream all she wants, I replied. The law's louder. Behind us, just barely visible through the trees, Valerie Huxford stood on the trailhead, watching us with the cold intensity of someone who'd realized her world was slipping, and intended to, claw at every inch to get it back. And in that second, I understood something with complete clarity. If I didn't take action immediately, she would. The picnic pavilion at Maple Crest was usually filled with kids' birthday banners, lemonade coolers, and quiet weekend gatherings. Today it felt like neutral ground before a war. I chose it intentionally, open, public, impossible for Valerie Huxford to twist into a private HOA proceeding the way she loved to do. The board chair hated public spaces she couldn't control. Officer Vega arrived first, shoulders hunched, eyes darting around like he expected Valerie to materialize from behind a picnic table. His uniform looked heavier today, weighed down by the decision he'd finally made. "You're sure no one followed you?" he asked. I nodded. "She's too busy trying to patch her board together." He let out a shaky breath. "Good, because I brought something." That sentence alone tightened the air. He pulled a small black flash drive from his pocket, gripping it like it was made of glass. His fingers trembled as he handed it to me. "This is everything," he said. "Body-worn audio from previous calls, the ones she forced me to mark as resolved before the reports were finished." My stomach dropped. "How many?" "6, he whispered. 6 incidents where she pressured me to ignore misuse of authority, harassment complaints, intimidation tactics. Even a resident who tried filing a restraining order but backed out after Valerie talked to her privately." My hands grew tight around the flash drive. "And that's not all," Daniel added, swallowing hard. "I recorded her today, right before she ordered us to disperse." My breath froze. "You recorded her?" He nodded. "On my secondary mic, the one she doesn't know I have." For a moment, the pavilion felt utterly still. This wasn't just help. This was the crack that could bring down the entire structure she'd built. The enforcer in crimson appeared in the distance then, standing at the crosswalk like she wasn't sure whether to approach or flee. When she finally started walking toward us, Daniel stiffened. "She's here to warn me," he muttered. "Watch." Sure enough, she slowed the moment she reached the pavilion and forced a smile so tight it looked painful. "Daniel? Grant?" She cleared her throat. "Madam President wants a unified front. She'd prefer you avoid any unnecessary statements." He laughed under his breath, soft, bitter. "Tell the board chair she doesn't get to define necessary anymore." The enforcer in crimson blinked, startled by the defiance. "Daniel, think about your position. You signed the HOA liaison agreement. You're supposed to support leadership. I'm supposed to support the law," he said flatly. She opened and closed her mouth, flustered. Her gaze flicked between us like she was hoping one of us would crack first. "Look, you two are escalating things. If you just give Valerie time..." We're done giving her time, I said. The officer of rules approached next, breathless and skittish, clutching her binder like a security blanket. Valerie is furious, she whispered desperately. She said she'll have both of you removed from the community if you don't comply. Daniel exhaled sharply. Removed? For exposing illegal radar equipment and an unjustified discharge? She doesn't have that power. She thinks she does, the officer murmured. Her fear said everything. Daniel stepped closer to me. It's worse than you think, he said. 2 months ago, she told me, off the record, that sometimes people need fear to follow rules. The world tilted. She said that? He nodded. And I recorded that too. The officer of rules stumbled back, hand over her mouth. Oh God, she meant it. She actually meant it. Footsteps echoed behind her. Valerie Huxford appeared at the edge of the pavilion, posture rigid, chin lifted, eyes burning. The tyrant in heels had returned, and she looked ready to tear the entire community in half if it meant saving herself. Daniel, she said, voice clipped, I need to speak with you privately, now. He didn't move, didn't blink, didn't breathe. No, he said, we're done with private conversations. The clipboard queen froze behind Valerie. The enforcer in crimson shrank back. The officer of rules looked like she might faint. And for the first time since this began, Valerie realized she had lost him. Daniel turned to me, voice steady for the first time. Let's finish this. I'll give a full statement, and I'll testify. Her mask cracked, her eyes widened, her breath hitched. Because this wasn't just betrayal, this was collapse. I didn't return inside my house. Not yet. I stayed in the driveway, the afternoon sun sliding across the cracked pavement, illuminating the long scrape where Lena's tires had jerked during the gunshot. That mark alone could have told half the story, but I needed to prepare for what came next. Victory strategy. RE5 depended on precision, not emotion. Outside authority intervention required airtight evidence. I brought out my portable forensic kit, something I routinely used for accident reconstructions. No documents, nothing hidden. Just tools, measurements, facts. The stuff Valerie Huxford couldn't twist, no matter how many board votes she staged. As I positioned the laser trajectory tool beside the dent, I heard footsteps crunch on the driveway. Daniel Vega, still shaken, still committed, still terrified. He hovered a few feet away. Are you sure this is the right time? She's spiraling, Grant. The board chair is unpredictable right now. That's why we move now, I said without looking up. Before she pushes someone else into something reckless. He exhaled shakily. She's already summoned an emergency board session. The enforcer in crimson is calling it a crisis meeting. No doubt, I muttered. She'll try to rewrite the entire chain of events. Or bury it, he added. She's done it before. I stood, wiped my hands, and angled the laser pointer directly at the bullet strike. The beam extended backward toward the cedar curve, landing on the exact stretch where Valerie had stood, screaming about community safety. Daniel stared. That's exact. Ballistics usually are. Behind him, I spotted the clipboard queen pacing at the far end of the sidewalk, wringing her hands so hard she might have bruised her fingers. She kept glancing our way, torn between spying and running, back to warn the tyrant in heels. The officer of rules lingered near a mailbox, trembling visibly. They knew the truth was no longer a rumor. It was evidence, cold, visible, unshakable. Daniel took a careful step beside me. Grant, I need you to understand something. Once this goes official, once we send this to state-level review, she won't just lose her position. She might face charges. She fired at my wife, I said quietly. If it were any other homeowner, she'd have called the police herself. He nodded, guilt carving deep lines into his expression. You're right. I adjusted the measurement markers again, making sure the angles were undeniable. Each scan, each reading, each calibration built the case brick by brick. She's not going to stop, Daniel murmured. She's already threatening to remove board members who don't stand with her. The enforcer in crimson looked terrified when she walked past me. That's because they're realizing the HOA can't protect them from the law, I said. He hesitated. I also heard something else. I looked up. His voice dropped. The tyrant in heels told the officer of rules that Valerie did what had to be done. Those were her exact words. She's justifying this. She thinks the shooting was necessary. My jaw tightened. Then they're more gone than I thought. Daniel swallowed. You still want my full statement, right? I need it, I said. Your audio logs, your witness notes, your recorded quote from earlier, all of it. Then I'll give it, he said, steadying his breath. Every last piece. A car door slammed nearby. We both turned. Valerie Huxford stood across the street, hands on hips, chin lifted, rage boiling behind her eyes. The tyrant in heels wasn't trying to hide anymore. She marched toward us like she owned the ground beneath her feet. You're gathering evidence, she demanded, voice cracking around the edges. Against me? Against the truth, I replied. No, with it. The clipboard queen rushed behind her. The enforcer in crimson followed, whispering frantic warnings. Valerie ignored them all. You think you're building a case, she hissed, but I'm building mine too. Daniel spoke before I could. No, ma'am, you're unraveling. Her breath hitched. A tremor rippled through her posture. For the first time, she didn't look like a leader. She looked like a cornered animal. Daniel leaned closer to me. Grant, finish your setup. I'll get the supervisor on the line tonight. I nodded. Because now? The trap wasn't hers. It was ours. And for once, we had all the leverage. The clubhouse parking terrace overlooked most of Maple Crest, and that height, usually peaceful, felt like the perfect place to lay out the final stages of what needed to be done. I chose it deliberately, wide open, neutral ground, visible to anyone watching, and I knew she would be watching. I set my laptop on the hood of my truck, syncing the laser trajectory images and angle calculations. Each file tightened the vise around the truth. Every measurement restored a little more power that Valerie Huxford had tried to take from us. The board chair had thrived on shadows, intimidation, and isolation, so I brought the fight where she hated it most, out in the open. Daniel arrived a few minutes later, breathing hard like he'd jogged half the way. He looked lighter than earlier, though still tense. Supervisor's reviewing the initial submission, he said. She said her exact words. This is now outside local authority scope. Good. That was the goal. Victory strategy. The B5 was no longer theory. It was in motion. He stepped next to me, scanning the organized files on the screen. Every piece of this, it's airtight, Grant. She can't twist angles, timestamps, or ballistic paths. She'll try, I said. She already is, he replied. And almost on cue, the enforcer in crimson appeared at the far edge of the terrace, clutching her phone, posture stiff. She hesitated before walking toward us, like she wasn't sure which version of herself she needed to be. The loyal lieutenant or the woman finally scared of the consequences. Madam President wants to address the community tonight, she said quietly. She's calling it an emergency order and safety clarification. A bitter laugh escaped Daniel. She's drafting her own salvation. The enforcer flinched. She's not stable right now. That made her look over her shoulder, scanning for Valerie as if the tyrant in heels might burst from the clubhouse doorway. Fear flickered across her features. Real fear, not political anxiety. She's threatening to expel homeowners without board vote, the enforcer whispered. She said she has executive wartime authority. I raised my eyebrows. Wartime? That's what she called it, she said shakily. A war for control. Daniel let out a long exhale. She's unraveling faster than expected. The enforcer in crimson's voice rasped. She told the clipboard queen to erase everything from today. They're panicking. That was valuable. Desperation always reveals the cracks. Then she stepped closer. And she told me to give you a message. I braced myself. She said, "Tell him I'm not done." Daniel muttered, "She shouldn't have said that." "She didn't mean it as a threat," the enforcer added. I shook my head. She meant exactly that. The enforcer swallowed, clearly regretting delivering the message. She backed away, but not before glancing at my laptop, eyes widening at the trajectory visuals. "Is that the bullet path?" "Yes," Daniel answered, "and it's going into the official record." The enforcer's breath stuttered. "Then tonight is going to be worse than we thought." She left quickly, heels clicking too fast, revealing panic she couldn't hide anymore. Daniel turned toward me. "She's cornered, Grant, and cornered people do stupid things." "I know," I said, tightening the folder of evidence. Across the terrace, the clipboard queen emerged next, her binder pressed to her chest like a shield. She approached timidly. I need to tell you something, she whispered. Daniel stiffened. What now? She looked behind her again before speaking. She asked me to alter the meeting minutes, she said, to remove any reference to the gunshot, to fabricate a verification of excessive speed. She wants the HOA records prepared before the emergency gathering. Fabrication? Daniel repeated. So she's officially falsifying documentation. The clipboard queen nodded shakily. And she wants the officer of rules to back it verbally. I clenched my jaw. Are you going along with it? Her breath hitched. No, I can't. I thought I could handle her demands, but not this. Daniel let out a slow breath. Then you just became part of the solution. Her eyes watered. She won't forgive me. She won't have the chance, I said. Behind us, a door slammed. We turned as Valerie Huxford stood at the clubhouse entrance, arms crossed, chin high, fury radiating from her like smoke. The tyrant in heels glared at the three of us as if we'd stabbed her empire through the heart. You're all making a mistake, she spat. But the quiver in her voice told the truth. The mistake was hers. And tonight, the whole community would finally see it. The clubhouse main hall had never felt this cold. Not temperature cold, energy cold. The kind that settles over a place right before something long hidden finally drags itself into the light. Residents filtered in slowly, hesitant at first, then in steady waves as rumors rippled through Maple Crest. Valerie Huxford was calling an emergency meeting, and not the kind with cookies and HOA newsletters. Daniel stood beside me as I set up the projector against the far wall. The laser trajectory scans, angle diagrams, and impact point photos waited in a clean file folder on the table, evidence organized for the moment the supervisor called back. Victory strategy. Narsa 5 was already moving, and tonight was where it took shape. The clipboard queen hovered near the beverage counter, wringing her hands so aggressively her knuckles reddened. The officer of rules paced the hall's edge in short, terrified steps. The enforcer in crimson stayed near the door, chewing the inside of her cheek like she wasn't sure if she wanted to run or defend the board chair. Then came the entrance. Valerie Huxford strode into the hall like a self-appointed monarch walking into a courtroom she assumed she still owned. But cracks showed everywhere, her tight jaw, the tremble in her fingers, the forced lift of her chin. The board chair wasn't stable anymore. She was hanging by threads. "Everyone take a seat," she commanded, though half the people were still standing. "We're addressing a serious threat to community safety." A murmur spread, not supportive, skeptical. Valerie's eyes snapped toward me. She wasn't just angry, she was cornered. Before certain individuals spread misinformation, I want the truth laid out. Daniel muttered under his breath. Here it comes, the rewrite. Valerie stepped onto the small stage, heels clicking like a countdown. Earlier today, a resident, she gestured vaguely toward me, attempted to weaponize an unfortunate incident. He's constructing a false narrative to undermine leadership. The officer of rules visibly winced. Valerie continued. His wife was speeding. I acted in response to real danger. That set off gasps, not agreement, shock. I stepped forward slowly. You fired at her. She pointed at me, shaking now. You're twisting. No, I said. I'm clarifying. I opened the laptop, projecting the first image, a glowing outline of the bullet strike mapped with perfect angles. A clear beam shot backward to the cedar curve. The hall went silent. This is the bullet path, I said, measured with certified forensic tools. Residents leaned in, phones came out, whispers erupted. Valerie's face turned gray. I clicked to the next image, the tripod placement, captured from the maintenance shed lot. Daniel stepped up beside me. The radar equipment was illegal, he said. Misplaced, tampered with. None of the readings were valid. The clipboard queen sank into her chair, burying her face in her hands. The enforcer in crimson whispered, Oh God. Valerie's breath hitched. Daniel, you're the HOA liaison. You're supposed to support board procedure. He didn't flinch. I support the law. That broke something inside her. You ungrateful, she began, but the officer of rules grabbed her sleeve in panic. Valerie, stop! No! she shouted, jerking free. "He's destroying everything we built." "What you built," I repeated. "Or what you controlled." Her eyes went wild. "This community needs discipline. This community needs safety," a resident called from the back. Another stood. "We heard the gunshot." Another. "We saw you aim." Another. "My kids were outside." Valerie stumbled back, overwhelmed. The tyrant in heels was losing the room faster than she could breathe. I advanced to the last image, the one Daniel had brought. The audio waveform hovered on the screen as his secondary mic recording played. Sometimes people need fear to follow the rules. Valerie's voice, cold and unmistakable. A wave of horrified whispers crashed through the hall. Valerie lunged toward the projector, but Daniel caught her arm. "Don't," he warned. "It's over." Her face twisted. "You're all turning on me." "No," I said quietly. "We're finally seeing you." The enforcer in crimson backed away. The clipboard queen cried silently. The officer of rules whispered, "What have we done?" Valerie looked around, panicked, shaking, lost. And for the first time, she wasn't feared. She wasn't obeyed. She wasn't powerful. She was exposed. And the community she'd ruled through intimidation was finally waking up. The hall couldn't contain the uproar, so the meeting spilled into the outdoor pavilion. Neighbors clustered under the string lights, murmuring like a rising storm. Phones were already out, recording every second. People wanted the truth on camera now, not behind closed doors where Valerie Huxford had ruled unchallenged for too long. Daniel stood beside me, shoulders squared, while the clipboard queen hovered near the railing, trembling like she expected lightning to strike. The enforcer in crimson paced near the stone steps, rubbing her temples. The officer of rules clutched a binder like a life raft, eyes darting anywhere but at Valerie. And then the board chair herself stepped out into the open. Valerie tried to maintain her old posture, chin high, shoulders sharp, but the floodlights exposed everything she wanted to hide. The tremors, the sweat, the fear. "This outdoor session," she announced, her voice strained, "is to reassure the community that misinformation will not be tolerated." Half the crowd scoffed. The other half glared. I stayed silent, letting her unravel on her own. Valerie lifted a shaking finger toward the group. "You've been deceived. What you saw, what he showed, has been doctored, staged, manipulated." The tyrant in heels was grasping at ghosts. Daniel raised his voice before she could continue. "Valerie, the forensic supervisor is en route. The evidence is already transmitted and verified." Her head snapped toward him. "You traitor! I'm a professional," he shot back. "Not your shield." Gasps rippled across the pavilion. The officer of rules stepped forward timidly. "Madam President, maybe we should pause." "Silence!" she snapped, making him recoil. "You don't speak unless I direct you." That was the point. The crowd turned. A woman from the left side yelled, "He's a volunteer, not your soldier." Another chimed in. "We heard the gunshot. My daughter ducked behind a mailbox." Valerie swallowed hard, nostrils flaring. I acted for community safety. The clipboard queen, shaking but gathering courage, lifted her voice. "No, you acted out of anger." The crowd shifted, dozens of faces turning toward her. She continued, voice cracking. "She ordered me to alter the records. She wanted the minutes changed. She wanted the radar readings falsified." Gasps exploded. The board chair took a step forward, fury snapping like electricity. "You're lying to save yourself." The clipboard queen shook her head, eyes welling. "No, Valerie, I'm done being afraid of you." A murmur of support rose behind her. Valerie spun toward the enforcer in crimson. "Back me up." But the enforcer looked away. "I told you earlier, I can't do this anymore." "Coward," Valerie hissed. The enforcer stiffened but didn't retreat. "I'm finally doing the right thing." The officer of rules lifted a shaky hand. I need to say something too." Valerie barked, "Don't you dare." But he did. "Your order to fabricate the narrative. I can't support it. The truth matters more than my seat on your board." Cheers erupted from the crowd. Valerie stumbled back a step. Her empire wasn't just cracking, it was collapsing in real time, piece by piece, confession by confession. I finally stepped forward, projecting my voice over the gathering. "You wanted this meeting to rewrite the story," I said. But the truth is bigger than your fear. That bullet could have killed my wife, I continued. It could have ricocheted into another car, into a child, into anyone standing nearby. Valerie blinked rapidly, panic shining behind her eyes. You're turning them against me. No, I said firmly. You did that on your own. A voice from the crowd shouted, Remove her from the board. Another, She's dangerous. Another, She can't control this place anymore. Valerie threw her hands up, voice breaking. I built this community. I protected it. Daniel stepped beside me. You terrorized it. The pavilion roared with agreement. A cluster of neighbors surged forward, not violently, but with unified presence, forcing the board chair to step backward until her heels touched the railing. She looked around desperately, to the clipboard queen, to the enforcer in crimson, to the officer of rules. None of them met her eyes. Her dynasty was dead. And when the supervisor's car turned into the lot, headlights cutting across the stunned crowd, the last sliver of her control flickered out. Tonight wasn't just confrontation. Tonight was accountability. When the supervisor's vehicle stopped in front of the pavilion, the entire neighborhood fell into that strange hush that follows a storm, still buzzing with adrenaline, still trembling with the weight of what had finally broken open. By the time I walked back to my house, people were still gathered in clusters, whispering, pointing, processing. For the first time in Maple Crest's history, fear no longer flowed in one direction. Lena waited for me on the front lawn, her hand resting over the faint dent on the passenger side door. The bullet strike, the reminder, the thing that began all this. I joined her, feeling the knot in my chest loosen, just a little. Is it over? She asked softly. Not yet, I said. But we're close. The night air carried the faint echo of footsteps, neighbors heading home, finally speaking truths they'd buried for too long. Beyond the street lamp, the enforcer in crimson stood beside her car, staring at the ground. The clipboard queen sat on the curb, phone pressed to her ear as she gave a trembling statement, and the officer of rules leaned against a post, breathing unsteady, like a man finally exhaling after years under a weight he couldn't name. Then Valerie Huxford appeared at the end of the walkway. The board chair was no longer marching, no longer commanding. She moved stiffly, as if every step scraped against denial she didn't know how to let go of. The tyrant in heels wasn't terrifying now, just fractured, cornered, stripped of certainty. The supervisor followed a few paces behind, clipboard in hand. Valerie stopped in front of us, eyes searching mine for anything. Weakness, remorse, an opening. She found none. You turned everyone against me, she whispered. No, I said calmly. They finally saw you. Her jaw twitched, but she didn't fire back this time. The officer of rules approached hesitantly. Madam President, he began. She flinched like the title stabbed her. Your access has been revoked, effective immediately. The clipboard queen added, You're removed from the board, Valerie. Her breath hitched. You can't do that. Daniel stepped forward from the sidewalk. The supervisor can. The supervisor held up the file. The evidence against you is overwhelming. The false directives, the ballistics trajectory, the unlawful discharge of a firearm, tampering with radar equipment, attempting to falsify HOA records. Each phrase punched another hole in whatever armor she thought she still had. You'll receive a full notice in writing, the supervisor continued, and the sheriff's office will contact you for a formal interview. The enforcer in crimson swayed where she stood, whispering to no one in particular, It's really happening. Valerie's gaze snapped to me again, but the fire was gone. Only the ashes of fear remained. This wasn't supposed to happen. People are supposed to follow rules. They will, I said. Real ones. She staggered back, gripping her arms, and for a moment her face twisted with the realization she could no longer outrun. Her empire was finished. She left without another word, slow, defeated, small. As her figure disappeared down the street, neighbors began drifting toward us. A few thanked Daniel, a few hugged Lena, a few touched the dent in the car like it symbolized all the unspoken battles they had fought alone. But one older man stepped closer, voice steady. You didn't just stand up for your wife, you stood up for all of us. I nodded, feeling the weight of that settle in my chest. Someone had to. The clipboard queen wiped her eyes. You saved this place. Maybe. Or maybe the place had finally saved itself. I glanced at Lena. She smiled through tired eyes. The cedar curve behind us swayed gently in the night breeze, no longer a battleground, now a reminder of fear confronted, of truth exposed, of power reclaimed. And before the night closed around us, I looked straight toward the viewers who have been walking through these moments with me. If you want more stories of homeowners standing up to HOA tyranny, hit subscribe right now, share your story in the comments, and let me know where you're watching from. Because battles like this, they happen everywhere, and no one should fight them alone.